Alrighty.
Are we ready?
Welcome to this great storytelling session. Yes, we're ready to hear whatever you have to say. This is, by the way, November 7th, 2000, with Aunt Corrine, darling Aunt Corrine, telling the family stories about Grandmother Castle and her own as they were growing up.
It is just too bad that my darling sister Joey is not here to help with this, because I'm sure she remembers things that I don't. But hello to all the family. My first memory of life in this world was an apartment that Mother and Joey and Dad and I lived in, and I remember my dad and a friend carrying a stove upstairs, and at this time he injured his back and he was plagued with back trouble the rest of his life. Another thing I remember from that apartment was going to the corner to wait for Joey to come home from school, which was always a happy time in my life. Not too much comes to memory, but it was just during that time. Mother was working at the 5 and 10 cent store, and she met a man, and she and my father were divorced. And we, evidently Mother got custody of us because she told us that she was going to take us to this nice woman who lived in a great big brick house, and she cared for children. And it turned out to be the large orphanage in Sioux City, Iowa. It was certainly a change for us. We went there with cute clothes that my mother had made for us, and they were put in with everything else, and you would go down the line, and you never knew what you were going to wear. Hopefully it fitted that day. And our sleeping arrangements were great, huge dormitories with little cots side by side, and luckily Joey and I were able to sleep side by side.
How old were you?
I was probably 6, maybe 6.
So Mom was 7.
She was 7. And
And the reason Grandma did this was because
she couldn't care for us, or she got married, and maybe she did not. Leave your hands alone, Corinne.
No, it's okay. It's cute.
She married. She and D.C. Barnes was the man's name, and they married, and evidently she just thought she would put us there for a while. And by the way, we were at the orphanage well over a year, because we spent 2 Christmases there, I remember.
Did she come at Christmas?
I do not remember that. She used to come on Sundays to see us, and she would bring us lollipops, and we would suck on the lollipops, and then when we would have our peanut butter sandwiches that were so dry that evening for dinner, we could hardly swallow them. Let me go back to the sleeping arrangements. Joey was plagued with bedwetting, and more so at that time because we were 2 nervous little girls. You just cannot imagine we were such nervous little girls. So, and when she wet the bed, she was punished. I do not remember how, but she was so frightened that she was going to wet the bed. And she would wake me in the night, and we would get up and we would shake the sheet like this to dry it so she wouldn't be punished.
I remember she used to tell us that she tried to lay in between your 2 cots so that it would run down between and not get on her sheets.
Not get on the sheets. Now, I don't know whether we ever fooled anybody with drying the sheet that way, but I remember that. Mm-hmm. And while we were at the orphanage, Joey had the mumps, and I can see her to this day lying on a little cot in the big recreation room. And I just hated it because she couldn't go out and play, and all. She was just so swollen with mumps. And I had head lice, and I was segregated down to the basement. And the way they treated head lice in those days was wrapped your head in a large towel soaked with kerosene.
How terrible.
That was just terrible, but it did get rid of the head lice. We also had severe cases of impetigo, and we were isolated to another section of the orphanage. And the way we were treated was at night we would be put in the bathtub in a Lysol tub, and they would scrape the scabs off and flush the Lysol water up on you. And I don't remember so much it happening to me, but I remember standing there watching. Joey had a terrible case of it. Watching them with her and the blood running down and me crying.
Oh.
Also, I had my tonsils out while I was there. Evidently, they went to all the children and who had tonsils, they took them out because I was also put in the basement in the infirmary or whatever it was, and I had my tonsils out. And I remember lying there, and I had a white porcelain wash basin that I spit into and everything, and it got so red I thought, oh, I'm bleeding to death, but I didn't.
Oh, terrible.
And one of the most pleasant things, the pleasant thing that I remember from the orphanage was that if you really behaved yourself, when you marched to school, you got to march in the head of the line with the head mistress or whoever she was. And so I tried so hard to be good, and quite often I got to march at the head of the line.
Did Mother ever get to?
No, you know, when we were children, Joey was, well, what you say, the Bible says, kick against the thing. If Joey didn't like anything, everybody knew it. And you know, your mental state stays better that way. I tried so hard to be so good and to please everybody, and I think sometimes in my life I suffered from that because you just hard to be good all the time. The marching to school, I loved that. I've always felt so proud. And while we were in the orphanage, as you know, in many large cities, maybe not so much anymore since orphanages are a thing of the past, but service groups like Lions and Rotary and so forth would have big picnics for the orphans. And they'd bring all the orphans to the park, and they had a peanut eating contest, and we were seated at a table. I'm sure everybody was participating, but somehow the newspapers took a picture of the table where I was sitting, and it was in the Sunday paper, and my father saw it. He had not seen us since the divorce, and he went to the orphanage. Things were done so differently in those days, and proved to them that he had sufficient funds to care for us. Evidently, when Mother took us there, she had said she could not financially care for us. But Dad proved to them that he had a job and was able to care for us. So they just packed us up and sent us with him. And we went to South Sioux City, and we boarded and roomed with this very nice woman. And I'm sure we went to school there, but there's so many lapses in my memory. But Joey and I heard through the neighbor children that the ferry boat was going to come down the Missouri River, and we thought that it would be a boat full of fairies. And we just begged and begged the lady that we were living with to let us go, and she said, well, if you'll be very careful. So we went over to the river and sat down on the bank, waiting for the ferry boat to come by. And the bank gave way, and I went into the water. And I went down and
You
up.
couldn't swim?
No, I couldn't swim then, no. And I went down and up, and I thought, oh, my folks will be so sad.
Because you thought this was it, huh?
I thought I was dying, yes. Well, there were many adults around and everything, but my dear, only sweet sister took off her shoes and socks and reached in and pulled me out. By my hair, yes. Thank you, April. By my hair. She was famous for pulling people around by their hair, wasn't she? Well,
All to good purpose, I'm sure.
yes. Then that article appeared in the paper that brave girl saves her sister from drowning, and the brave girl was Joey, and the sister saved from drowning was me. And my mother then saw that in the paper, and came.
She didn't know that you were gone, or she did know you
She
were
did
gone?
know we were gone, but she didn't know where we were, you know. My dad took us, and he was not going to tell them where they were because it was a bitter, bitter divorce, and they fought over us. And so she had not up until that time known, and my dad, until the picture of the orphanage appeared in the paper, he did not know where we were. But when Mother saw that, she got the police and came and took us. And I don't know how my dad felt, but the lady packed up our clothes and we went with her.
Was your dad there when this happened?
No, he was at work. He was working.
So he came home and you were gone?
Yes,
They did do
We
things
were.
differently, didn't
Yes,
they?
Then, as I recall, we went to a farm near, um, what is the town east, to a little town east of Ruthven. I want to say Ayrshire, but that's where we lived later. Oh, Dickens, Iowa, to a farm outside Dickens, and we lived there with Mother and DC. And then we went to a one-room school, and there was another boy and me. We were both in the first grade still. Time flies when you're having fun.
Oh, gosh.
And we went to school there, and we had all the freedom in the world. We would get little baby rabbits and try to raise them, and of course they always died. And we climbed up in the barn to get baby birds, and they always died. So then all of a sudden we were going to go to Denver. DC's brother offered him a job there. And before we went to Denver, we went to see Aunt Lula and Uncle Everett. And while we were there, I was in the kitchen messing around as children do, and I pulled the flour bin out, and it slammed on my fingers, and I lost 2 fingernails here. So we got on the train 2 days later with my hand all bandaged, and we went by Pullman coach. And Joey and I slept in an upper berth. And we went to bed that night, and in the morning when we got up, the Pullman porter came to help us down. And he was black, and I would have none of it.
Had you ever seen a black
No,
person?
not to my knowledge. I didn't remember that I had, and I was afraid of him, and I wouldn't let him help me down. We arrived in Denver and went to live with DC's sister and brother-in-law. And my mother always felt a lot of time that children should be seen and not heard, and so we were relegated to the basement to play all the time. But we got some roller skates. They bought us roller skates, and we spent hours roller skating in this concrete basement. And there were poles at either end, and we would skate and swing around and everything, and that was so happy. Then we moved to Idaho Springs for DC's job. And we had a dear little house out north and west, I guess, of Idaho Springs, along a pleasant little stream. And that was very nice living there. Joey and I would push it was a closed mine, and he was just the caretaker there to see that no one molested it. And Joey and I would push the coal car or the silver car up, get on it and ride down. It's a wonder we didn't have accidents.
So
We
it was an
also-
old silver mine, an old closed silver mine.
Closed silver mine. And then another thing we did for amusement was we would walk up behind the house out onto the mountain into sort of a meadow and pick flowers. And I have no idea to this day what the name of the flowers were, but they were so bright and so red. We called them bloody noses. Yes. And while we lived there, DC, that was my mother's husband and my stepfather. Well, when we took his name, when we went to live there, I was Corrine Barnes. He would have to go to town. He would have to go to Denver. He would hitchhike to Denver to pick up his paycheck, and very seldom came home with any money. And Mother threatened to leave him, and she was going to divorce him. And he said, "If you leave me, Mary, I will commit suicide." And he would go in the, he would go in the bathroom and smear iodine around his mouth and come out and say he had drunk the bottle of iodine. Or he was going to kill himself. And Joey and I would take all of the knives and everything out of the kitchen and everything that he could possibly harm himself with and take them out and hide them.
How old were you two at this
I
time?
must have been in the 2nd grade by then.
Oh, gosh.
And oh, by the way, the last time we were in the mountains, Dean said, "Would you like to go by and try and find that house?" And I said, "Oh, I would love to." So we were coming down from Winter Park, and we turned where I thought it was. And I said, "Oh, this is not the way. The stream should be on this side of the road instead of this side." Well, in a little while, the stream went under the road, and we found that house, and it looked so great. They had built another room on it.
Are you kidding?
And while we were standing there, and I said, "Well, where is the mine gone?" Anyway, while we were standing there, the lady came out and she said, "May I help you?" And I said, "I used to live here over 65 years ago." And she said, would you like to come in? And I said, oh, yes. So we went in the house, and I said, there's a bedroom there, and a bedroom there, and a bath there, and here's the living room, and here's the kitchen, and all. But I said, where did the mine go? And she said, well, it's long gone. Someone bought the property and built a big house up there. And this young couple who had two school-aged children had bought this house, and he commuted to Denver, and they were going to live there in their retirement. Well, I'll get back to my story. Mother, while we were living there, one of the pleasures we had, a salesman, a player piano salesman, came to the door and wanted Mother to let him put the player piano in the house on approval, and they would buy it. And she said, we can't buy a player piano. My husband isn't even here now. And he said, well, just let me put it in the house and see what he thinks of it. And he never came back for that piano. And Joey and I pumped that player piano until our legs would ache. We would sing When the Red, Red Robin Comes Bob, Bob, Bobbing Along, and Charmaine, and all of those old songs. We just loved it. We got more good and more pleasure out of that piano. Then my mother decided to really leave D.C., and we moved to town.
There was a bush outside that house too, wasn't there, gooseberry bush?
Oh, yes. There was a gooseberry bush out at the corner from facing the road to the left of the house, right straight out towards the road, was a big gooseberry bush. And Mother used to make gooseberry pies that were out of this world. But I would very seldom go near it because I felt that a gooseberry bush grew where you buried a dead goose. Oh, and I don't recall how we moved to town, but Mother did leave him, and she took us, and we stayed with some friends for a very brief time, and that was over Christmas. And New Year's, it snowed so much, and I went to the window the next day and I said, oh, look, Father Time and the new little baby walked by our house last night. And now they don't make anything about the new year and the new baby and everything. But I believed in that long after I believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Then we got a small room or an apartment somewhere. And Joey and I started to school in town. And we would get up in the morning and go to school, and Mother, I don't remember whether she was working or what, but she was not there, and she didn't get our breakfast. And I don't mean this any disrespect to my dear mother, but this was the way the situation was. And in school, when we had hygiene in those times, and they were teaching good health, and they would say, and what did you have for breakfast, and you, and they would come to me, and I would say, nothing. Nothing? No, nothing. Well, the authorities investigated and found out that Mother was not having enough time to care for us. So that's when my mother put us on the bus and sent us back to Iowa to my father. And when we got back to Iowa, we stayed with Aunt Iola, my darling Aunt Iola, my favorite of all my aunts. We stayed with her, and some of the children were sick or something, and so they were going to medicate us all, and they lined us all up and gave us castor oil, and mine went down and up. And we started school again. We went to so many schools. But when we had been in Colorado at Idaho Springs, I had been promoted. You know, they used to promote. So Joe and I were in the same grade, and when we got back to Iowa, she said, I am not going to school if I have to be in the same grade with Kareem. So they held me back.
Oh my goodness. Hope it didn't have any lasting effects.
No.
How old were you then?
Then I think I was in the 3rd or 4th grade. I haven't even looked at my notes. I just
Remember.
jabbered on, yes. Oh, and I did tell you that we took DC's name when he didn't adopt us or anything, but in those days divorce was frowned upon, and they just wanted us to all have the same name. So I was Corrine Barnes and Joey was Josephine Barnes.
Did you go back to Hannah then?
Yes, we did. And then we were embarrassed. We were so embarrassed when we got back there, and all of our cousins said, on my books and stuff, Corinne Barnes. Barnes? What do you mean Barnes? I had a difficult time explaining it, and here I have. And I had been promoted in the same class, to the same class with Joey. And when we went back to Iowa, she refused to go to school unless they had moved me back, and they did. From there, we moved to Ayrshire. Dad got a job in Ayrshire, and that's a little town southwest of Ruthven. And I do not know what my father did, but we lived in a large one-room apartment above the pool hall, round in the alley.
Was this when he started prize fighting?
No, he was prize fighting before he ever married my mother.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. he was.
'Cause I thought he said that Mom used to say that he would, during some of the rough times, would do some prize fighting to beat everyone. And
I don't remember that.
might have that happened when after you moved back to?
Oh no, when I went to Denver, you mean, to live
Mhm.
with Mother? I don't think so.
Because
he
Mom
did-
used to tell about the lard sandwiches, pancake and lard sandwiches you take to school.
Oh, I know it.
Don't forget that. They won't believe it.
There's a beep.
Yep,
On the,
this thing, no, I'm not sure. Go ahead.
Oh yes, and we lived in this place above the pool hall. And we did. Times were really tough. We all three of us slept in the same bed, and Joey made me sleep in the middle, and I hated it. I hated it. That and the large sandwiches on pancakes about did me in. But we had, our cousins from Ruthven would sometimes come and visit us and sleep on the floor.
which cousins?
Oh, Jane and Kathy and Bob and
Uh-huh. Now this was Granddad's brother's kids?
and my mother's sister. And
Oh, yeah,
Iola
that's right.
and Mother were sisters,
Yeah.
and Uncle Roy and Dad were brothers.
So these were Roy and Iola's children.
And we were so close to them, and I guess we were what you would call double cousins.
Mhm.
And Jean is gone, Tom is gone. Bob and Jane live in California now, and we have seen them.
How about Kathy?
Well, yes, Kathy lives in California. Kathy married a Mormon, and she set her cap for him, and she asked us to all pray for him, pray that he would be taken by her, and they married, and he had some money, and she stayed with him until he died, and so now she's pretty well fixed. From Ayrshire, I do not know. Oh, in Ayrshire, I met the loveliest family. The husband was a veterinary, and they lived in the finest house in town, and they had a little girl named Harriet, and she was just my age, and we became fast friends. And I loved to go to their house, and I'm sure that this fastidious woman thought I was a scroungy little girl. But she was so kind to me and so good to me. And at the winter school play, Harriet and I had the leads, and we learned to skate like this, you know. She was the boy and I was the girl. In one scene, we were skating like this, slipping our feet along the floor. Then, I do not know how this happened at all, but we moved out to a farm with Leonard and Mabel, and they had 2 little children, and Dad worked for them. And Joey and Dad and I lived with them.
Mom!
Good, thanks.
And we hated it. We
You
just
did?
hated it. Yeah. And they went away at one time, and
What didn't you like about it?
we just didn't like living there. We didn't like Mabel. We just didn't like it.
She must not have been nice to you.
Well, not really. And she had many blackheads on her back, and she would get us to pick them. We hated it. We just hated it.
The mother of the other 2 children would make
Yes.
you pick her black. So good.
This is gross. I should not do this.
It's so interesting.
And we lived on the farm for a while, and they went away, and they went to Kansas City, and Leonard went to see about a job. And while they were gone, oh, we had so much fun. Dad did the plowing, and Joey and I rode the horses, and it was wonderful. We were always so happy when there were just the 3 of us or something, you know. Leonard and Mabel came back, and for some reason, we all moved to Kansas City, and I would give anything to know where in Kansas City we lived and what the situation was. We had, all the other kids had chicken pox while we were there, and I still say to this day that I did not get the chicken pox, but others tell me that if I lived with chicken pox, I must have had it. And that didn't last very long, and they moved away, and
Leonard
Dad and Joey and I.
They left their farm and moved to Kansas?
Yes, moved to Kansas City, Missouri. And Dad and Joey and I had a house that was totally bare of furniture. And we lived there for a while, and then evidently the social services or somebody looked into it, and they shipped us back to Iowa again.
Back to your mother?
No, back to Iowa.
The whole group of you? You and your sister and dad, your father?
And my dad, yeah. I don't know what happened to Mabel and Leonard and their 2 children.
But you were all together in Kansas? In that house without any furniture?
No, we were in a nice house. But then when they left, we had to have some place to live, and I wish I could remember all the details, but it has been 70-some years ago. And we lived for a time with the Sanfords in Eagle Grove. That was my dad's sister, Kathleen, and her husband, who was coach of the team, and they had 4 children, Ward, Marn, Boyd, and Josephine, or Josephine and Boyd. And that was a happy time, too. We loved Aunt Kathleen. But later, when she would become angry with me, she would say, "You are just like your mother," because she blamed Mother for the breakup of their marriage. And Dad was her darling little brother, and of course she was protective of him. And if you wonder what we're doing, your mother has prevailed upon me to tell my life story.
She said, yeah.
Oh, and Aunt Kathleen was such an efficient woman, and there were the 6 of them and the 3 of us. There were 9 in the family, and she would stew a big hen for Sunday dinner with noodles and dumplings and everything, and she cooked everything in the chicken. She even cooked the feet, and Dad ate the feet. He had other chicken too, but he always ate the feet.
I thought that only happened in Peru.
Oh, in Mexico, Arlene took a group of students to Mexico one time on the train, and they were served chicken soup, and she thought, oh, how lovely, and she dipped into it and picked up a foot. Didn't eat any soup. Oh, here we are. Oh, and I don't remember why we left Eagle Grove, but we moved back to Ruthven. That was where I was born, in Ruthven, and that's where we lived most of the time. And we lived in a little house 2 blocks up from the station, Highway 18, and the station that my uncle owned. And it was a nice little house. It had a back porch with an old washing machine that you did like this and wrang the clothes through the wringer. While we were there, Joey was out one evening. It was shortly after we had moved in, and I said, Dad was out in the living room reading or something, and I said, Dad, do mosquitoes bite at night? And he said, oh, lie very still. So I did, and he came in and turned on the light, and we were bed bugs. That house was so infested with bed bugs, it was terrible. And I, who hate bugs so, we put...
What do they look like?
I don't even remember, but they do bite. They do. We would put dishes of kerosene under the bed. We did get rid of them, but it was terrible, a terrible thing.
Oh my.
During that time, things were very hard, very difficult for everybody. Dad wasn't working, and I remember for 3 weeks we lived on potatoes and onions and milk. We got milk from the station, and we had grown potatoes. And to this day, I dearly adore potatoes, so it didn't hurt me a bit. Grandfather Hanna would come by. He's the one that found the little house for us. You know, there wasn't too much to rent in those days, but he found this little house for us. And he would come by to see if everything was all right, and he just despaired at the way Joey and I kept house. But you know, without any role model or anything, you don't learn to keep house just off the top of your head. But then I learned to cook when we lived in that house. The first meal I ever cooked for my dad, he said, "Sweetie, this is the best meal I've ever had. I fried potatoes. I fried bacon until it was crisp and put onions in it and a can of pork and beans. That is tasty." We had that lot when
We
we
should
were
have that in our family cookbook.
And
Fried potatoes, onions,
and
bacon, and baked beans.
well, the potatoes weren't in that. The potatoes I fried separately.
Separately, and then the bacon,
Yes.
onions, and pork and beans.
Plenty of carbohydrates in that meal. And my father said that was the best meal he had ever eaten. And since that day, I have loved cooking. I have here bedbugs were awful, and that is the end of the notes that I have written. But then Dad,
When did you take your trip
Yeah.
on the rail?
yes,
Is it coming up?
during this time, I don't know if my mother wrote and said she wanted to see us girls to send us out for a visit or something. But money being so scarce, my dad and Uncle Stub, who was my mother's brother, decided to take us in the boxcars to Denver. So we rode the rails to Denver, from Ruthven to Denver.
Describe it. A
When-
typical 2 or 3 days worth of it.
We took very little clothing, and I do not recall any time that we had any bath facilities, and I don't know where we went to the bathroom, but we would go to the railroad yards, and Dad and Uncle Stub would try and find a boxcar that didn't have anybody in it. There were men riding the rails then. They called them hobos, so I guess we were hoboettes. And if they found one that was empty, they would hoist us up there and quickly close the door and lock it so nobody could come in. But many times we rode in a boxcar at night with other men in it. We never did see any other women or children. And we would ride for...
Did you have to be sneaky? Because
Have to be kind of sneaky, yes, uh-huh.
Because you didn't want anyone to discover that you were getting in, huh?
Oh, no, and actually the railroads were not too pleased to have so many people riding the rails, as they called it. We would ride during the daytime, maybe not very far at all, because it seemed to me it took us well over a week to get from Iowa to Denver. And we would come to a small town, the train would stop, and we would all get off. And Uncle Stub and Dad would take us to a city park. You know, all the little towns had parks at that time. And they would tell us to just stay there. And they would go and try and find work to buy something to eat. And this sounds like we were desperately poor. And we were. We were desperately poor. And Joey and I were sure each time they left us that they were not going to come back and get us.
How sad. And you were how old at this time?
Maybe 10. And I don't know if I said earlier, but my daughter Arlene said to me one time, "Mother, all of the pictures of you and Joey when you were little, you look so close together and huddled together." And I said, "Well, very often that was all we had, was one another, you know." But always, of course my dad would come back and get us. They always came back and got us and brought us something to eat. And we would either stay there and spend the night in the park, or we would catch another train. And how they knew which trains were going to Denver, I do not know. Maybe they
Checked in the office
checked.
at the station.
And we were very frightened when we get on the boxcars if there were any other men in there. Very frightened. And we finally got to Denver. And Dad went to a store and bought us what were very popular then, beach pajamas. Cotton beach pajamas, 2-piece pajamas. And we took a bath in Cherry Creek in Denver and cleaned up and he took us to where Mother was living, and she was at work. It was a small residence hotel that served meals, but she had just one small room. And he took us, and she wasn't there, but he knew that she would be, and they said yes, that Mary, I don't know what she called herself then, Mary Barnes, lived there. So he left us, and I guess we stayed a couple of weeks with her. Ate in the dining room, and we'd go to movies, and I must have been at least 12 by that time, because Joey was beginning to notice boys, and she kept making me go to the same movie because she had her eye on one of the ushers. We would walk downtown and go to the movie, and from the bedroom, from the window in Mother's room, right down next door there was a house, a residence house, and the family that lived there had a girl just my age, and we became very, very close, and we changed our names. I was Patty, and I've forgotten what she was. And why I would ever change my name from Corinne to Patty, I don't know. But while we lived there, I was Patty. And it irritated Mother that that happened. I do not recall at all how we got back to Ruthven.
Certainly couldn't have been as exciting,
No,
the getting back
No,
as
we
the
must
going
have
out.
just, yes. Oh, I know. In those days, people who were taking a car somewhere would take passengers for a very small fee to help pay for the gas. And we went with this man and his wife and another person who was paying, and Mother paid for Joey and me. And the man and his wife sat in the front, and Joey and this other person sat in the back, and I. And she made me sit in the middle again.
So you had to sit next to the stranger.
I had to sit next to this stranger all the way back to Ruthven. And when we got back to Ruthven, this was about the time, because I was 12 when this. Oh, we would also spend summers at the lakes with Aunt Kathleen, and one summer, Joey had a terrible case of poison ivy, to where they didn't realize how serious it was until her face was just all swollen and everything. And in today's time, she would have been hospitalized. And at that same time I was working, Aunt Kathleen had gotten me a job with this family that lived in Ward's Rest, which was their big cottage that they had for rent. And I did all of their housework and all their cooking for a family of 5, and I was 12 years old.
Isn't that something? When was it that you got the job that you loved and Mother got the horrible job?
This is coming
Coming
up.
out.
Then we,
How long did you work for that family? Just during the summer while they were there?
no, it was all winter when the school was in session, because all of the teachers took all of their meals there at the teachers' boarding house.
Huh.
One fall or summer, and these years kind of overlap because I can't remember when. Mother and her sisters all came to see Aunt Iola in sort of a sisters reunion, family reunion, and everybody was there. The kids were all there and everything, and everybody looked around. They said, "Where's Corinne?" And my darling Aunt Iola said, "Well, she's canning beans this morning. They're ready, and they have to be canned." And I was canning green beans.
Oh, goodness.
And the time that Joey and I both had jobs, when Dad was away working somewhere, I don't know who arranged for the jobs, but I came out on the good end of that. We were to work for our board and room so that we could go to school there. We wouldn't have to live with some of the relatives or something, or live alone. And I was so surprised when I was told, you were not aware of all of these things until it was happening. I was so surprised when I was told that I was going to go and live with Mr. and Mrs. Hughes, who ran the teacher's boarding house. It's fine. And Joey went to live with, I can't remember their names at all, but this family. And he had he drove a truck that delivered oil all the way around and everything. And I told April he had a shrew of a wife and 2 or 3 little kids. So just at the very beginning, you could see that I had the plum job. I loved living there. I loved living there. They were so sweet and good to me and seemed to appreciate so
How
much.
old were you?
That was the year I was 12.
Oh.
They were so good to me and appreciated everything I did. And I had a room of my own. There was one little room on the second floor of the house, a little narrow stairway that went up, and she had it fixed up so nice. She always had someone that lived with her and helped her. And I was fortunate that I was the one that winter. And I earned my board and keep too. I would get up in the morning and help with the breakfast and then go to school. And didn't help much with the lunch, but would help with the dinner and help clean up the kitchen after dinner. And on Saturdays, I had this lovely, lovely, pleasant job. Mr. Hughes would kill 3 chickens, and they would bring them down to the basement with a pot of boiling water, and I had to pluck them. And the stench, the smell was so bad that I always threw up. If you have never smelled chickens that have been dipped in boiling water for plucking, you have missed a real treat. And then I always baked pies on Saturday morning too. And it was,
Tell about how Mom got out of her job.
oh yes,
She just had to take care of the kids and clean
and
up.
do work and
cook.
everything. She had a miserable job. And knowing my sister, she did not do it pleasantly. She hated every minute of it, and I'm sure they knew it. Oh, it was a holiday. And this was after I had gone to live with Mother. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. It was a holiday, and Aunt Iola had invited Joey down to have dinner with them, so she helped. I wish I could do this with her name. Anyway, and she said, all right, you can go, but you have to be back such and such a time. This house is a mess, and I'm leaving the kitchen just the way it is. So Joey went down and had dinner with Aunt Iola and Uncle Roy and the kids. And right after dinner, she said, I have to go back. And Iola said, well, why? And Joey said, well, because her name is on the tip of my tongue. Nobody liked her in town either. I don't know why they ever let Joe go there. Said I had to come back and clean it all up, and Aunt Iola just blew her stack. She said, come on, we're going up there, and we're getting all of your clothes. This, I think, was Thanksgiving. And you're coming down here with us. And Joey lived with them until she graduated from high school.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
Well, so that family had their Thanksgiving dinner and left all the mess
Yeah.
for
Uh-huh.
Mother to clean up.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, Joey. I'm sure Joey worked a lot harder than I did under terribly unpleasant circumstances. Everything I did was a pleasure because I loved being there, so. Oh, and while I was at the teacher's boarding house, maybe I was a little older than 12 because I was in 8th grade.
Well, from 13, you could have been
13,
13
yeah.
easily.
The math teacher, the high school math teacher, taught me how to drive.
At 13.
Yeah, never did me any good, but I did know how to drive a car. Oh yes, and I loved all the teachers that came there to eat, and it was just so pleasant when I remember things and I say this and that, and I remember and I say, oh, that was one of the happiest times of my life. That was one of the happiest. Along about, around my birthday on August the 30th, the year that I would enter the 9th or 10th grade, Mother sent money for me to come and live with her. And I remember you asked me why Joe didn't go. I do not know. I do not know. Not that I was a favorite at all, but when I got that money, I thought, go to live in Denver? No way. And so I didn't do anything about it. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, my mother called and she said, well, are you or are you not coming? And if you're not coming, send the money back. So I thought, well, I'll go out and spend a couple of weeks, and then I'll come back to Iowa. And I got on the bus and I cried all the way to Omaha, I think. And Mother and Bill lived in a little
She had
house.
since married Bill. Huh?
Yes, yes, she had married. And Joey and I went to Denver to visit Mother and Bill 2 years before that. And maybe one of the reasons that they sent for me was that I liked Bill, and I put myself out to be nice to him and put myself out for him to like me, and Joy could have cared less. Oh, bless her heart. Anyway, we went to visit one summer, and they took us up in the mountains on a camping trip. And that was the first time I'd ever been in the mountains, and I thought it was so beautiful. And Joey sat and read True Story magazines the entire time. And we would get up and cook breakfast in the morning, and they'd ask us how many eggs we wanted, and we would eat 3 or 4 eggs for breakfast. In the mountains, your appetite is just increased, particularly if you're still in the growing stage. So maybe that is why they sent for me. And I'm sure they intended to send for Joey too, but she married before that, she married almost right out of high school.
Well, I remember some of the stories of that time after you had gone, and she was there with Jane and Kathy and
Bob and
yes, they had some times.
oh yes. Mother Aunt Iola's and Uncle Roy's house burned down one time, but before it burned down, I was there sleeping. In an old house, one room opened into another, and they rented some of those rooms. But this night, Aunt Iola said something about this little room that I could go up there and sleep, and so I did. In the middle of the night, my cousin Tom. This is going on. He tried to get in, and the people in the next room said, "Get that fool boy out of here."
Did he know you were in there?
Yes.
Oh.
I didn't know I was still on tape.
Is Tom gone?
Tom's gone. He
Okay,
died years
okay.
and years ago, yes.
He was a foolish boy at that time.
Yes. Yes, yes. There are many more things I could tell you, some of them terribly unpleasant, but not fit for mixed company. So,
Well, just as you think about the stories. There, I think that's it. I can't see it. This is ridiculous. Yes, it's recording. Now you put the pillow up and I could see it. It was against the white shirt. You couldn't see it.
I do not know exactly how long we lived in that little house in Ruthven, but so many things happened while we were there, in addition to the bed bugs. I had a very dear friend named Jean Daly, and her mother was not too well. She was always going to the store to get some sort of something for her headaches, and I learned later that it was just Anacin, which is not a drug or anything. But Jean and I were very fast friends, and we used to spend a lot of time in a great big tree out at the side of our house, way up in the bushes, daydreaming what we were going to do and what we were going to be when we grew up. Her mother, during the summer, had rented a little cabin at Lake Okoboja, and she was taking Jean Daly. I don't know what happened to Jean's dad. I never did know who he was. She was taking Jean to Okoboja for a week or two, and she just begged her mother if she would take me. And her mother said, "Well, Jean, I just simply cannot afford all that food." And Jean said, "Oh, we won't eat much." And I said, No, I don't eat much." So she said she would let us go. And we had such fun. We'd go to the fun house during the day and then go back to the little cabin at night. And her mother went out then. And when her mother would come home around midnight, she would always fix herself peanut butter sandwiches. And I would smell that peanut butter, and I was hungry for the whole week that we were at Lake Okobojo, and I could hardly go to sleep being so hungry, but I was not going to eat a lot because I wanted to stay there. Jean and I were just inseparable, and I don't know what grade we were in, but the two of us made the finals to go to the county spelling bee. That was so exciting. We practiced and spelled everything we'd ever heard of and everything. We went to the spelling bee, and I'm sorry to say that Jean did better than I did. She lasted about 3 more rounds than I did, but we had fun anyway. It was very good. And when we lived in Ruthven, in that little house, I broke my arm several times. Once I just fell down, and once I fell out of the tree. And Joey and I liked to walk out to Lost Island Lake and go swimming. And this one time I had a splint on my arm like this. I think Dad had done it. I don't think I even went to the doctor that time. It was all wrapped and everything. And he said, "Now don't you get that arm wet." Oh, no, we won't. We went out there, and my dear sweet sister carefully unwrapped this arm. And it was a little white and weak, and we went out in the water. Pretty soon I was standing on my head on this arm. It was probably the best therapy in the world for it. And then when we finished swimming, which we always stayed a long time, we dressed, and she wrapped it up as professionally as she could, and we went home.
No one never knew.
No one ever knew. It was, and it wasn't this arm that is so strange. It was this arm, and it was strange also. But also, Joey and I used to like to go out to Lost Island Lake fishing. And we would start out in the morning, and we must have taken our lunch. We'd start out in the morning with a bunch of worms and fish all day and come home with a long string of bullheads. Been out there in that hot water, hot sun all day, but we'd bring them home, and Dad'd clean them, and oh, they were delicious. We would eat them just like corn on the cob, just nibble along on either side of the bone. I think that's where we learned to fish and love it so. Also, we would beg Dad to let us take bedding and go out there, and we would hold it way above our heads, and we would wade out to the island, and we'd camp overnight, just 2 little girls.
Fun. What a dream.
It was very, very much fun. And then we'd get up in the morning and pack up our stuff and hold it up. But we had to, because the water was fairly deep. I don't know. I'm sure we could touch the bottom all the time, but if we couldn't, we could have treaded water. But that was very much fun. That was my first camping experience, other than the boxcar business. At this same time, all of this rather runs together. I can't tell which year is which. My Uncle Roy would hire my sister and me on rainy nights to pick up night crawlers. If you don't know how that is done, when the grass is wet, and it has to be raining or they go away, the night crawlers will crawl up out to get the water, and you have a flashlight and you crawl along and you grab them before they go down. And he paid us, of all things, $1 a gallon to pick up those night crawlers. I don't know what he sold them for, but he did make a lot of money on those night crawlers and he made us promise that we would not put any broken ones in there, because he felt they would kill the rest of them, but I don't think they would. I think you can keep worms together 2 or 3 pieces and they live. That was at the time, too, when I think I said earlier that my mother's sisters came to visit. And they said, "Where's Corrine? Canning green beans."
Yeah.
Well, how did that work? Everyone else got to come and have fun, but just you were...
I don't believe that I believe that I said the green beans need canning. We always, in this little house, there was a ramshackle garage. Nobody had a car in those days. Ramshackle garage. And Joey and I fixed it up and built sort of a stage, and we would put on plays. Put on plays and invite all the neighbor kids. And I still remember something. It's a little embarrassing to think about it. She prevailed upon me to sing "I'm in Love with You, Honey," only to put in Stanley Johnson's name. "I'm in love with you, Stanley." What a dumb dog I was. I think about that now and I think, oh, how silly.
How old were you?
Oh, between 10 and 12. Young, young.
And who was Stanley?
He was the boy in my class, lived out in the country, Stanley Johnston. I liked him for several years. Maybe that's why I cried half of the way to Omaha when I went to Denver.
Probably.
And we had the biggest imaginations. We'd put on plays and invite everybody to come and do the silliest things.
Tell us about that. Tell about some of the plays and costumes and...
Well, I remember at one Christmas, we were at Aunt Iola's and Uncle Roy's house, and everybody was there for the holidays. And we had not had much of a Christmas. We were with grandfather and grandmother, Hannah, and we got oranges and nuts and stuff in our socks. But we realized
that was it.
that was it. We realized that, the situation, I mean, you're not dumb when you're a little girl like that. But we went to Aunt Iola's, and the package must have been delivered there, because when we got there was a package from my mother. We each had a doll, and we had long silk pajamas. Like, well, now they're nylon, that nylon knit. Well, then, they weren't nylon then, but oh, they were so beautiful. And we wore them the rest of the day.
What color?
I really don't remember. Sort of two-tone, and we tailored our play that day to suit those pajamas. And
Because you wore it in the play?
Oh yeah, we wore them in the play, and we danced. And after the dinner was over, we went to the front part of the house and produced this play. And then we prevailed upon all of the adults to come and watch us. And there we were, Joe and I, in our new pajamas, rocking our new baby dolls. It was fun. And I used to. Oh, when we would go to family dinners like that, things are different now. When we'd go to family dinners, the adults would all sit around the table and eat, and then the children ate. Did your mother ever tell you that, April?
She may have. I don't remember.
Yeah, we never ate until after they did. And we always ate so much that we almost got sick. We'd eat and think, oh, I am miserable. Why did I eat so much? But turkey and dressing and mashed potatoes, as I told you, my favorite meal.
What were some of the other plays you put on? We've been watching Little Women, the movie, and
Uh-huh.
that's what all those girls used to do. They used to put on plays. And
Well, we'd put on plays with
did
the
you
mother and
did you make them up yourself? Your own?
Well, we just made them
script?
up, and we danced, and we'd say, now you do this, and you do this, and we did silly things, but it was fun. And we sang a lot, and we danced as best we could, particularly in our new pajamas. Oh, let's see. I have a list here, Nightcrawler. That's about it. Oh, when I went to Denver, I think I mentioned earlier, this is the second segment of this. As I mentioned earlier, I cried all the way to Omaha, and I thought I will go to Denver to live with Mother and Bill. And I'll stay a couple of weeks, and then I'll come home. But life doesn't always turn out like that. I got there, and I realized that would not go over very well. So I started to school 3 or 4 weeks late, down in a little homeroom down in the basement, little old ugly room in the basement of the high school. And oh, I was so miserable. And about the second or third day, Bob Starkey patted me on the shoulder. He said, "What is your name?" And I told him, and they were nominating members for the student council. So he said, "I nominate Corinne Hanna." And I was elected. And that sort of launches you in school, if you do something like that. But I had a miserable time the first few weeks. I couldn't find my locker the first day and cried all the way home in the rain. Almost didn't find my way home. And all of the girls carried purses. So I had to have a purse, just a little purse. And I lost 3 before I learned to hang on to them. And then, I wish I could remember more. Oh, I will tell you. This is after I got out of school, and I was working, and Joey was living with us then, but she had not been working, and I had saved my money, and Mother and Bill were taking a trip, and I was going to go with them. And listen, that was a pay-your-own-way trip. A tire blew out, and I paid for a third of it. We went to Yellowstone and on up to see Norton and Aunt Alice and Uncle Frank, and that was a fun time. And Bob Hanna, my cousin Bob Hanna, was there in the Navy
The
station.
one that used to sneak into the room? Did he improve with age?
Yes. And,
Did he ever apologize, or
oh
did you
no,
just
he
hope
didn't.
you didn't
Nah, he didn't.
think about it?
No, he preferred to forget it too. And on the way back, we stopped at my Aunt Maud's and Uncle Charlie's turkey ranch. Oh, it was a lovely place near Corning, California. We stopped there and we're going to stay a few days. And while we were there, they had me put on Margaret's wedding dress with my Oxford shoes, and we horsed around. I have pictures of me in a wedding dress then. And when we arrived, Aunt Maud said, "Well, what do you think of Joe? She got married." And I said, "Joe who?" "Well, you're..."
Oh, you were on your trip
Yeah.
that quickly?
Mhm.
I knew it was quick. How long was your trip?
Well, it was it was very quick. You can bet your boots your mother married quickly, but didn't it turn out beautiful?
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
She said, and I said, "Joe who?" And she said, "Your sister, Josephine." I just burst into tears. I didn't realize how I had been looking forward to seeing her, because she was going to come back to Denver when we got home and look for a job. She was going to look for a job. Well, I was just crushed, but I soon got over it, and we had a good time there.
Well, any stories about going to the lakes with Aunt Kathleen and
Yes,
Grandad used
I did mention the summer we went, and Joey had the terrible case of poison oak.
poison
All over, poison ivy, all over her face. And that was the summer that I worked for the family at Ward's Rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned to cook pretty well that summer. Cook and clean house for them. They were a nice family.
Well, tell about the time that when we came through on our way to Paris.
Yes, this is
Just for a
much,
short visit, we were just visiting you on
Yes.
the way.
Yes.
this is much later. This was when we lived on 47th Street in Oklahoma City. Each of us had 4 children, but Alan was just a baby. Do you remember that?
Mhm.
Alan was just a baby. And John was not
He was
school
a-
age. No,
yeah, he was like
little.
2, maybe.
And the 6 of them stopped through on their way east, and they expected their port call to come while they were at our house. And there were 12 of us, 13 with my dad. I don't know where we all slept. Do you remember where we
It
slept?
just seemed like all such a happy thing.
Oh, it
Always,
was.
I have no bad memories of it. You
I-
probably do, but
Well,
my memories were great.
I would get a little nervous sometimes, and one time I thought, oh, and I went in the bathroom to cry, and then several people followed me in, so I couldn't cry. But every night, I wish I could have told Joey this. It was stressful on the adults, the kids. 8 kids running around and everything, but every night I would just pray, I'm not going to cry. Dear Lord, don't let me do anything that would come between my sister and me. Don't let me do anything that would come between my sister and me.
You didn't.
I didn't.
You
I
did
hope
not.
Oh, well, I can tell you something that April.
How long were they there?
And
Seems
6
like-
weeks.
yeah, I
in
was gonna
in
say
excess
6
of 6 weeks.
We started school.
Oh, you started to school.
I went
yeah.
on that field trip that is
Yeah.
the highlight of my elementary school years to the cotton gin.
Yes.
And
yes.
and that's when we started a horse thing where we would gallop around.
Well, why don't you
grazing
come up
on
here?
It's on there. They can hear it.
Oh yes, and I had beautiful bushes, shrubbery in the front of the house, and they were just loaded with little red berries. In the fall, they just turned red and so pretty. And one day I went out and I said, "What happened to these bushes?" And Tim and April said, "Oh, we picked all the berries for you." Do you remember that? Do you remember
Not
picking
a
the berries?
bit. Not a bit. We
And,
thought maybe you would do something great, like make a berry pie or something. I'm
Oh,
sure.
yes. And while they were there, Bern took my kitchen stove apart and cleaned it thoroughly. You know, when you live in a 3 bedroom, 1 bath house, and are busy, 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 there's not a lot of time for extra things. And he did a lot of things while he was there. He shampooed the rug, and we did have fun, didn't we?
We did. It was just a great. I loved it. It was a highlight of my childhood. The stay over in Oklahoma City.
And Robin went to Taft Junior High. You girls, all the rest of you went to the grade school.
Mhm.
A long block up to the right from the house. And I guess he took the bus. I don't know. No, we didn't have a bus then. Somebody must have taken him to school. But that was nice.
Mm.
But I surely was aware of the fact that even if I got tired or crabby or cross, don't do anything to
You were successful.
every night. Please don't let me do anything, Lord, that would.
I do remember Mom and Dad feeling so bad about it. But I guess we were in a position where we couldn't do anything.
We would discuss it. We would have these discussions, and they would say, 13 people in a little house. They would say, we have to go to a motel or something, or go rent an apartment. And I would say, as soon as you rent that apartment for a month, your port call is going to come through. Oh, each day they looked for that port call. And I don't remember when it came through. All I remember was all of a sudden you all weren't there anymore.
Well, any parting thoughts? Any
Well-
advice to the next generation?
Any advice to the next generation? I just cherish your family. I only had one sister and I cherished her. There were times in our lives when we fought and everything, but as we grew older, we became very close. I'll have to tell you what your mother wrote me a letter from Japan. And she was telling about, you lived at this great big estate, you know, and you had
Servants.
servants, a
Cook,
yard
a
man,
yard boy,
and
maids,
a seamstress.
chauffeur. I
Mhm.
mean, we must have had 5 or 6 or 7.
And she was evidently moved to write, and she wrote me this long letter, and I wish I had it now, explaining everything about the grounds and the house and, and everything, and I sat down and cried. I was so tired the day I got it, and I thought, life just isn't fair. There's my sister over there living in luxury.
Oh.
But your dad was in,
He was the occupation army.
Korea, or
I
In
don't
Korea.
believe he was in Korea. Was he in
was
Korea
in
during
Korea.
that period?
I think
When
he
we were
went
in
to
the big house?
Yes, And then, you know, what did they call that time when the Japanese government furnished so much housing and everything for the military?
Those were some of the terms of the occupation.
That was. But when you go to Europe and all that, but Japan, the terms of the occupation were that the families of all the servicemen would be housed and cared for,
Mhm.
and they were.
They
And
were.
I wished at that time that I was a serviceman's wife.
Oh.
And I just, I don't have anything else to say except that
Well, tell us your philosophy of life. I could tell you what I think your philosophy is. Yeah, I bet you can too.
my philosophy of life, I had a book one time that said, enjoy, enjoy, and I loved it. My philosophy of life is to be as good as you can, as kind as you can, love the Lord, and have as much fun as you can.
Perfect.